You believe you understand women because you have consumed books, videos, and superficial advice. But the truth is that you are lost in a maze of illusions created by sugary romance novels, banal comedies, and motivational quotes. They have sold you the image of women as an unattainable enigma, a sphinx of indecipherable emotions. And yet, the reality is simpler and more brutal. Women are not an enigma, but they are also not what you insist on imagining. The mistake is not in them, the mistake is in you, in looking with the eyes of logic at what requires a different kind of vision. From an early age, men are taught to try to decipher invisible signs. The short reply in a message, the misinterpreted full stop, the emoji that seemed to hide a death sentence. Men gather like amateur detectives to interpret banal gestures when, in most cases, the woman doesn't even remember what she wrote. While you spend nights awake trying to understand why she didn't respond, she may simply be watching some series, without weight, without drama. Women don't analyze your every move as you imagine. They react to the moment, to their mood, to their inner climate. This is the first wound of understanding. You are not the center of the equation. You are just one variable among 1,000 others. I remember the story of a young man who spent weeks studying how to approach a classmate at university. He analyzed her books, her coffee breaks, her routes. On the day he approached her, he was impeccable, but she couldn't hear anything he said, preoccupied with her cat's illness. All his effort dissolved. 2 weeks later, when he met her again at a party, a silly comment about the music being too loud was enough for them to connect. It wasn't logic, it wasn't planning. It was the moment, the right instant, the emotional opening, the internal storm that turned into clarity. This is what so many men refuse to accept. Women are moods, not machines. Their emotional states fluctuate like seasons. You can't control winter, you can't demand summer. You can only observe and decide whether to go out or take shelter. However, men insist on believing that they can manipulate the weather. They think that flowers, status, strength, or obedience will bring about permanent sunshine. They ignore that female biology responds to a constellation of factors that are beyond their control. And what is most disturbing, not even she fully understands her own internal movements. Ask a woman why she fell in love and she will create convincing narratives. Because he is kind, because he is fun, because he has a good job. But this is just rationalization after the fact. The truth is that desire had already been awakened before for subterranean reasons, by invisible triggers that precede logic. The narrative comes later, as an acceptable justification for society, for the family, even for herself. The feeling always comes first. This is the principle that governs female psychology, that of retroactive narrative. First, she feels. Then she constructs the discourse. The male mistake is to believe that he can convince her heart with arguments, as if he could display a resume in slides, demonstrating qualities and achievements. It doesn't work that way. You can't buy desire with logic. You can't negotiate attraction with spreadsheets. And this is where so many fail. They become too good, too available, too predictable. They make women the center of their lives, orbiting like satellites without their own shine. And the consequence is inevitable. Boredom. She doesn't reject the good, she rejects the empty. She rejects the lack of intensity, the excess of guarantees, the absence of mystery. The heart does not beat in the face of absolute certainty. It needs risk, challenge, spark. That is why we so often see women trade the perfect, polite, reliable man for someone chaotic, even problematic. Not because they love to suffer, but because they want to feel. It is better to cry in a volcano than to fall asleep in a frozen desert. Chaos generates emotion. Emotion generates attachment, and attachment, even if painful, is still life. The man who offers only predictability also offers a slow death. And if even communication reveals this abyss, what can we expect from intimacy? While male desire ignites like a switch, female desire needs context, environment, connection. It is not just about the body, but the state of the soul. A misplaced touch, a cold word, a shadow of insecurity, and everything falls apart. A gesture of firmness, a calm presence, an unshakable confidence, and everything ignites. Her desire cannot be bought. It must be awakened. The great tragedy is that men insist on relying on their own lenses. They try to apply logic to emotions, predictability to mysteries, certainties to storms. But the feminine does not conform to these structures. It demands intensity, presence, firmness. It is not about dominating her, but about remaining whole in front of her. It is not about offering her the world, but about not losing yourself when her world collapses. Therefore, understanding the feminine is not about deciphering an unsolvable enigma. It is accepting that the code is not in what she says, but in what she feels. It is realizing that your value does not grow the more you give yourself, but the more you remain solid in your own light. Her love does not blossom in front of a servant. It blossoms in front of a man who chooses, who breathes for himself, who leads with clarity and welcomes without losing himself. And here is the secret that so many ignore. Don't try to be what you think she wants. Become what awakens in her the emotion she can't even explain. Because in the end, no matter how much she talks, explains, or justifies, it will always be emotion that guides her choice. And when you understand that, you will stop looking for magic formulas and start living in the realm of truth. The fragility of the male mind in the face of the female mind has never been a lack of intelligence, but rather the illusion that logic would be enough to decipher what, by nature, does not obey the rules of reason. Men believe they can build stability by offering constancy, predictability, and guarantees. And yet what often generates attraction is not absolute security, but emotional instability, the variation of feelings that keeps the flame alive. Does it seem cruel? Perhaps, but it is the human condition itself that is revealed here. Desire needs movement, and that which becomes static loses its intensity. Nietzsche already warned that life is the will to power, expansion, confrontation. A relationship that becomes a predictable routine ceases to be a field of power and becomes anesthesia. And the human heart cannot withstand anesthesia for long. The perfect lawyer, the kind and constant man, loses out to the chaotic bartender because one offers peace, while the other offers intensity. The woman is not consciously choosing suffering, she is choosing to feel. And feeling, even if it hurts, is better than living in a state of emotional death. Freud said that we seek pleasure, but above all, we seek stimulation. It is stimulation that pulls us out of apathy and keeps us alive. This is the underlying logic that explains so many seemingly irrational choices. It is at this point that female communication reveals itself to be a parallel universe. While men talk to inform, women talk to connect. When she shares a problem, men imagine they need to solve it, but their pragmatic logic hits an invisible wall. She doesn't want a solution, she wants presence. She doesn't seek advice, she seeks an echo. When he offers only logic, she interprets it as coldness, as an inability to penetrate the invisible terrain of emotions. Here, again, misunderstanding sets in, because men confuse words with facts, while women understand words as vehicles of emotional energy. And if language is already a battlefield, sexuality multiplies this chasm. Male desire is like a switch, turning on and off in seconds. Female desire is a complex panel, like an orchestra in which dozens of instruments need to align. Light, mood, self-perception, memories of the day, small nuances of attention. Everything matters. Science confirms this difference. Studies in evolutionary psychology show that female arousal depends more on context and emotional state than on direct visual stimuli, unlike men. This explains why she can alternate between ecstasy and indifference without him being able to identify the reason. And then there is the phenomenon of pre-selection, brutal in its clarity. A man desired by other women immediately becomes more attractive. It's like a crowded restaurant. No one needs to taste the food to deduce that it must be good. The interest of others acts as a seal of social quality. Women do not do this out of malice, they do it because their psychology has been shaped by centuries of natural selection. A man who attracts other women demonstrates survival skills and value. That is why so many men report that when they enter into a relationship, they start to receive more looks, more interest. Desire is contagious, and perceived value spreads like wildfire. The opposite is also true. When a man becomes overly available, when his life revolves around a single woman, he ceases to be a sun in its own orbit and becomes a satellite with no light of its own. And satellites, no matter how faithful they may be, never arouse fascination. Value lies in scarcity, in the risk of loss, in the feeling that this man is not guaranteed but must be won over every day. Psychology calls this the principle of scarcity. The human heart values what it can lose and despises what is given without a fight. However, modernity has exacerbated this dynamic. With social media, every woman carries in her pocket the possibility of receiving attention from hundreds of men in minutes. What was once the exception has become the rule. The market of desire has become inflated. An ordinary average woman today receives the validation that once only the most beautiful women received. This abundance creates an illusion of high value and, paradoxically, constant dissatisfaction. If there is always another gaze available, why choose the one in front of her? Choice has become a burden, and burden breeds paralysis. But there is an even deeper contradiction. While social discourse repeats that women want sensitive, vulnerable, open men, biology continues to respond to the archetype of the warrior: strong, calm, capable of sustaining the weight of chaos without falling apart. Modern women live in conflict between narrative and instinct. They say they want equality, but fall in love with dominance. They ask for gentleness, but tremble before firmness. This paradox is not a sign of falsehood, but of an evolutionary programming that does not disappear in a few decades of ideology. Here is the reality that baffles so many men. No matter how hard you try to be the perfect man according to the list she herself described, if you don't know how to generate emotion, intensity, and mystery, your presence becomes invisible. Attraction does not obey lists, but triggers. And these triggers are not controlled by reason, but by biology and the psyche. Life is not fair in this field. The unemployed artist can arouse more desire than the millionaire executive, simply because he embodies a symbol of adventure and freedom. Stability can buy comfort, but it does not guarantee passion. And passion is the engine that drives the female unconscious. It is she who decides, before any rational explanation, who will be chosen. And it is in this terrain, where logic and desire separate, that the real psychological war takes place. Because the man who understands this stops fighting against the impossible. He stops trying to convince, stops trying to buy love with flowers, gifts, or promises. He understands that everything depends on how he is able to generate emotional states, not on how he lists his qualities. This is the frontier where many get lost. They confuse constancy with weakness, devotion with dependence. They do not realize that value does not lie in excessive devotion, but in the ability to remain whole even in the face of commitment. Women do not seek a man who needs them to breathe, but someone who breathes for himself and yet chooses to be by her side. And when this truth is accepted, the game changes. The man ceases to be the desperate servant and becomes the magnetic center. Attraction is no longer pursued, but provoked naturally. And at that point, the dance between masculine and feminine reaches its most authentic form. What comes next is even more disconcerting, because it reveals not only how women choose, but how they say goodbye, how they protect themselves, and how they rewrite their own stories. Female loyalty is a field of paradoxes. While in love, a woman can defend the man she loves against the whole world, endure insults, ignore signs of decay, and remain steadfast even in the midst of chaos. Her devotion in this state is almost religious, but when the internal switch turns off, when passion dries up, nothing brings her back. It is as if a bridge has been set on fire behind her, and no effort at reconstruction can rebuild the crossing. The man who does not understand this insists on reviving memories, tries to argue, recalls the good times. But in her mind, all the happy moments have already been reinterpreted through a new lens. What was sweet turns bitter. What seemed eternal reveals itself to be a sham. There is no malice in this mechanism. There is survival. The female psyche reframes the past so as not to give in to the impulse to return. It is a brutal form of self-preservation. And this is just one example of how women process the world differently. While men carry open scars of rejection, remembering each no as part of their identity, women transform the no into a narrative. He wasn't ready. It wasn't the right time, we weren't compatible. The blame never falls on her. And this, while protecting her self-esteem, prevents her from reviewing her standards. That is why so many mistakes are repeated, so many bad men are chosen, so many illusions resurface. The female brain does not accept rejection as a personal failure, but as an adjustment of destiny. And so it goes, without learning, until reality forces her to face what she was avoiding. This mechanism connects to what evolutionary psychologists call a dual strategy. Women, in their essence, seek two archetypes: the man who generates immediate desire, intensity, risk, adventure, and the man who offers stability, protection, resources. Often, these two figures do not coexist in the same person, so the woman is divided. She desires instinct in one, projects the future in another. Or she spends her youth surrendering to the chaos of adventurers, only to later seek the comfort of stable men. It is cruel, but it is also part of evolutionary logic. What guarantees survival is rarely the same as what guarantees passion. It is no coincidence that so many women enter a crisis as they approach 30. At 20, they believe they have infinite time, discarding good men because there are always others knocking at the door. At 28, a shadow of anxiety begins to grow. At 30, panic sets in. The body sends signals, biology presses, options diminish. And when they reach 35, two paths open up: acceptance or delusion. Acceptance that time has left its mark and that the choice must be made with lucidity, or delusion that the same abundance as before still exists. This is the relentless logic of the invisible market of relationships. While men gain value with age, building themselves up and accumulating power, women must face the decline of an abundance that once seemed eternal. Another overlooked point is the way women compete. Men measure their strength in explicit duels: wealth, strength, status. Women act in the shadows. Their war is psychological. They destroy reputations with subtle smiles, undermine confidence with poisonous comments, manipulate the group's perception with almost imperceptible gestures. While men attack with weapons, women attack with symbols. The battlefield is social, not physical. And that is precisely why men so often underestimate female strength. They look at the surface, but the battle has already been won behind the scenes. And then there is the question of security. Many men believe that offering money, status, and material comfort is enough. But what women really want is emotional security. The poor man who stands firm in the face of adversity inspires more confidence than the rich man who crumbles at the first storm. Women seek not only external stability, but a solid heart, an unwavering mind, a presence that does not crumble. What seduces them is the feeling that they can give themselves without fear that the other will succumb. But the modern world creates a dangerous illusion that there are infinite options. Social media opens up catalogs of faces, like moving storefronts. Abundance breeds paralysis. There always seems to be someone better just a click away. This mentality creates fragile relationships, corroded by constant doubt. And in the end, the abundance of options generates not happiness, but anxiety. Too much choice does not liberate, it imprisons. The man who wishes to understand the feminine must abandon the arrogance of logic. He must realize that attraction is not an argument. It is not a favor earned through effort. It is not a reward for kindness. Attraction is a phenomenon that escapes reason. Desire cannot be negotiated. Love cannot be bought. Passion cannot be begged for. Either it exists or it does not. And if it does not exist, no grand gesture will bring it into being. What remains for man is to understand the triggers, understand the symbols, observe the dynamics. Because the mystery lies not in impossibility, but in the refusal to look beyond his own masculine lens. Jung said that every true encounter between masculine and feminine is at its core an encounter between the conscious and the unconscious. The feminine brings shadow, chaos, intensity. The masculine needs to bring clarity, firmness, lucidity. When one fails, the other becomes unbalanced. When both meet, a relationship is born that is not just passion, but alchemy. What sustains this alchemy is not predictability, but the tension between surrender and challenge, between security and freedom. And perhaps the biggest secret lies precisely there. Women want to surrender, but only to men who do not crumble in the face of the storm. They test, provoke, and challenge, not out of malice, but because their souls demand certainty that the other is strong enough to guide them without imposing themselves, to lead without crushing, to welcome without losing themselves. The weak give in and become dependent. Tyrants harden and become monsters. The lucid man remains firm, and it is in this balance that the feminine finds rest. Now, in light of all this, the question is straightforward. Will you continue trying to win her over with excessive effort, logic, and persuasion? Or will you learn to become the man who arouses emotion, respect, and desire without having to beg for it? If this dive made sense to you, show your support for the channel like this video, subscribe to follow the next reflections, and write in the comments a word that marks your commitment to evolve. A simple but powerful word. Write inner strength.